Hi, this is Owen McCafferty. I'd like to wish you a wonderful day. We have a whole slew of issues that we'd like to talk about relating to technology, but I thought it would be important to possibly talk about things that wouldn't be normally found in a narrative on technology, specifically how costly it is to maintain technology. What it means when you've got so many different programs and pieces of equipment that's required that there's a lot of bugs. And the difficulty to learn the technology. I'd like to focus in on those three. We'll have additional videos on this, but I thought maybe to start out, it would be very important to maybe look at what some of the technologies would be and how they apply to being in a profession. Now that includes accounting as well as dentistry, veterinary medicine, and dermatology. But I thought possibly we could put a fine point on it, because I'm always asked this question. In fact, I get a lot of phone calls from clients on a continuing basis, and I'd like to at least address it. And by the way, this video, as well as all of the ones that I've made on this channel, have been brought to you through the kindness of Professional Fusion. First of all, let's talk about technology's cost, both the hidden and the obvious costs of technology. Everyone thinks of technology as an acquisition cost, and that would mean the cost to purchase the technology from the vendor, open the box up, and put it on your desk. Unfortunately, technology doesn't work that way. The cost of acquisition, including the related sales tax, insurance, and other direct costs, is only the start of an amusing adventure. When you look at what technology would require in terms of cost, you have to keep in mind that you have to educate people as to how to use this technology. It has to be implemented. That is, taken out of the box, plugged in, and unfortunately, the narrative is not as intuitive as you might hope. And those that write that narrative may not even understand the language that you speak. So for example, when I read a lot of the instructions for technology in the installation phases, I sometimes think that, well, I don't think they're a natural English-speaking person that wrote this narrative, because it just doesn't follow. Not only are there misspellings and punctuation errors, but also it just doesn't follow. So when you're wrestling with the cost of implementation of technology, it's not something specifically that you're going to find is intuitively capable of being implemented and installed. And if you're having trouble trying to implement and install technology, you can only imagine about those poor souls that work with you that don't want to disappoint you, but honestly just don't know too much about that which you're trying to put in practice. And the worst part of it is that you yourself become divorced from the implementation process. And you say, well, just handle it. Just handle it. Well, unfortunately, those that try to handle are not as motivated as you, because first of all, they didn't most probably select the technology. And secondly, they don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to look bad, because it's their neck that's on the noose. And then often they don't implement it correctly. They get the technology to work. And then when you ask them, well, how did you implement it? What did you do? Why don't we sit down and just pull out a sheet of paper and write out the steps? It's usually the sound of crickets. And the reason is they don't know how they did it. They just played around with it. They did everything that they could in order to finally get the equipment operational, only to find that they really didn't know what they did. First of all, they may not have assembled it correctly. It may be driven by software that they don't understand. And by the way, these are folks that are being paid on an hourly basis, most probably. Or you've paid a fee, a stipend, to a doctor to implement the technology. And you soon find that the implementer has all the best intentions in the world, but unfortunately doesn't have the capacity to get the job done. So then what do? You usually call in the salesman. That's the first thing that I always think about. And the salesman often is difficult to find. And secondly, may not even be working with the company anymore. And then you're left to deal with another person who has less motivation because they didn't receive the commission. So the technology game, if you want to call it that, in bringing new things into your practice does have a cost, both a direct cost, that is the cost to put it into the practice, and then an indirect cost, and that is trying to install the darn thing to make sure that it's working so it can be used. And then, of course, the third element, the most important element, is teaching people how to use it so that it can be of some benefit to the practice. This requires time, and you notice I use the word technology in a broad brush approach. It can mean business applications, which could be financial or analytic. It could be information technology based. It could be medically and surgically based. But in all of the instances, it follows somewhat of a similar format. And that is, you're trying to get this darn thing going, but gee, it's not working the way you thought it was going to work. So it's the teaching, the implementation, and of course the unit cost. Once you get the technology established, you got to work out the bugs. So it's working now, but not working perfectly because there's so many different workarounds with other elements of technology. For example, your internet system, be that for medical, surgical, or financial purposes. Possibly it's for human resource management, whatever it would be. Fixing out the bugs and having one piece of technology communicate with another necessary piece of technology is difficult. It might even require that you call in a consultant that sold you the technology that you're trying to connect to, and then make sure that the two are working together. It's not as simple as you think. It's not just plug and play as they allegedly tell you it is. And sometimes you have to replace the older interfacing technology to be compatible with the current one that you just bought. And that's always a joy because you're trying to get the darn thing going, and then you find out, I got to spend more money. And the usual comment is, well, this is just too old and you're going to have to upgrade because it won't interface, which is the word that I cringe when I hear. It won't interface with the new asset that you bought. So it's not my fault. And really, it's not the fault of the technology you bought, but it's your fault because you just didn't keep on wasting money to put new technology in place. And of course you wouldn't, because if it's working, why fix it? And that wisdom is self-evident because you can see right now in trying to install something new, the heartache and the headaches that you have. So working the bugs out, the bugs that could exist inherently with a faulty piece of software or the interface between the software instruction and the hardware component, or thirdly, the interface with what other technology is dependent upon that technology working. I usually find it very interesting that when you buy a computer and you try to interface it with a printer and you try to do it through the internet in a Wi-Fi effort or a Bluetooth effort, that there's always problems. So that if you have the same issues, you're not alone. And then finally, in our first part of this discussion, let me just look at the notes. Is that technology, when it's first implemented, capable of being transferred to other parties? Remember the implementer, that person that you either paid a stipend or you paid a significant amount of money on an hourly basis, possibly with overtime, to learn? But can that knowledge then be transferred over to other individuals in your practice that have to use the same technology? What is that learning curve, not for the implementer or the initiator, but also those that follow in suit? Do you have to send those individuals to special classes? Was that included in the cost of the original acquisition, or is this a limited time only, and then after that you've got to pay a fee? Do you have to engage a consultant to come in and retrain and teach all of the people in your practice so they can use the technology? And the original initiator is no longer there. Gee whiz, they took another position. And in fact, they may have gotten that position because they were able to be stolen away from your practice by someone who wanted to implement the same technology but didn't want to pay the substantial overtime hours for that person to learn what you had paid dearly to at least initially start to perform. I can think of ultrasonography as the classic old example of what used to be a problem in the medical side, where obviously software, from a business application, QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online, when they first came in, it took many man-hours for people to learn how to use those. There's a lot of different examples in technology. Everyone loves to talk about it, but boy, try to be the person who's going to implement it and yet be the person who's one step away from the implementation, and that is the person that has to try to pick up the pieces after the initial implementer is long gone. So here's a few ideas. We have a few more that we're going to follow up on in future videos. I don't want to bombard you with a narrative, but in terms of part one on technology, I wanted to at least throw these ideas out. With that in mind, this is Owen McCafferty. Again, I'd like to say I am very grateful for you to be listening to this narrative. I'm stating the obvious, but I'm also saying as the final parting message, don't jump into technology too soon. Somebody just came in. So you can see this is really a working office. With that in mind, this is Owen McCafferty. And until we talk again, see you.